This is Scott Squier, and the Great American Race, the Daytona 500, will be coming at you this Sunday, February 23rd at 1 p.m. on Fox and many great radio stations across this country. Joining us to discuss this tradition is a legendary broadcaster. His voice has been heard on the Daytona 500 since the 1970s. He's the first to give lap-by-lap commentary on the Daytona 500 starting in 1979. He coined the term the Great American Race, which I used earlier on, and he developed the in-car camera for the 1982 Daytona 500 from Daytona Beach, Florida, where you can hear he definitely is. He is the legendary Ken Squier. Ken, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
What is the atmosphere there right now?
Well, it's tension high. We've just completed the first 150-mile race, and it lived up to all expectations. After we had a flawed training period yesterday, which saw several cars destroyed and some hellacious crashes, tonight they've turned it about, and they ran 150 green flag laps. And we had three cars side by side across the line for the finish, and by hundredths of a second, the winner was Matt Kenseth, the two-time winner of the Great American Race. Matt Kenseth coming home first. Very dramatic finish in that car for the Cambridge, Wisconsin driver. Placing second was Kevin Harvick, carrying his new colors, the white-red livery of the machine that will carry him through the entire year. And he looked pretty darn strong, the Bakersfield, California runner in second. And traipsing along in third was Casey Kane. He was all the way on the bottom of the track. As I say, they came across three cars side by side. The fourth place car was a surprise to some, and that is Marcus Ambrose from Launceston down in the Australian area. And he continues to try to win on a super speedway. Certainly proved he could do it on a road course. But the Tasmanian Devil was really looking very good tonight. He stayed up in front through most of the event. Very tight running throughout the race. At the time, they made one pit stop, and they did not take on tires, just fuel. And lo and behold, they still finished up with 12, 14 cars battling across the finish line within 1 second of each other.
Everything you just said there, Ken, is great, and I'm glad we get this play-by-play coverage. What impact does that have on Sunday, the way the finish was tonight?
Everything. These races, because they are the qualifiers, only the front row had been established a week ago in favor of that 23-year-old Austin Dillon, carrying the number synonymous with Earnhardt, but more important, synonymous with the grandfather of Austin Dillon, Richard Childress, longtime racer, longtime car builder, who's saved that number, retained it, and when the time was appropriate, put it to his grandson to get it done this year in a number 3 car. He led the earlier laps in the event, first 15 laps were his. He's automatically qualified from that pole position run. So toward the end, he stepped out of it. There was no necessity for him to battle it out. The front row had been established, so we were deciding in these 2 races, of which we've seen 1, 15 positions decided. And in the second race, they'll decide the next 15. Then they'll go to the 4 fastest qualifiers who have not made the field, and then the final 7 are provisional starters by owner points and by past champions. So that's all of this tonight is part of the drum roll to the Great American Race, and it is a tradition that has been part of the 500 since its inception in 1959.
Ken, I was checking with the odds makers today and looking at the internet sites, and 2 names seem to be the odds-on favorite heading into Sunday, and you mentioned one of them already tonight. Kevin Harvick and the other's Tony Stewart. Where do they stand, do you feel, going into Sunday?
Well, my bet would be a Quinella, and it would be the 88 and the 3. Richard Childress, who had such fantastic success with Earnhardt until that tragedy up here in turned 3 in 2001. This Austin Dillon is the real deal. He's a racer. He's still a young man, but after sitting on the pole at 196 miles per hour this past weekend, that very night, he went out and ran on the dirt track about 20 miles away and successfully won that as well. He just wants to race. So I think the combination of the power the car has and the effort that is being made by the RCR, the Richard Childress Racing Team, to get this car to win again as number 3, carrying that black and white livery, which means so much to so many American race followers, that gives him a chance to be one of 5 drivers who has won the 500 on their first occasion out. Now, the last time it happened was just 2 or 3 years back when we saw the Wood Brothers car successful with a 20-year-old driver and Trevor Bain. Trevor's getting ready to run here in the second event, the second 150-mile qualifier, and again, he will be part of the famed Wood Brothers Racing Team of Stuart, Virginia. So it's all part of, if you're into the mystique and the legends of American motorsport, this particular race represents everything that American stock car racing is.
You know, Ken, you bring it up there. I mentioned in my intro, everybody says it now, the Great American Race. You coined that phrase. How did you do that? Why did you do that?
Well, I found it because in Australia at Bathurst, their race there is the Great Australian Race. They don't say it's the greatest. They don't say anything like that. There's a lot of national pride. It's a national holiday when they run that race at Bathurst, or when they did in those days, back in the late 70s, early 80s. And it seemed to me that, of course, the greatest spectacle in sports was called the Indianapolis 500. And it seemed to me that this race really represented what is the best of America. For the majority of the racers are American racers that were developed, brought up on American ovals. And it's American production cars. I got taken to task by the New York Times for referring to it as the Great American Race, and the critique was that I had apparently never heard of Indianapolis. But in that particular year, I think 32 of the 33 cars that started, with the exception of a Gurney car, were all built in Europe, and most of them in Great Britain. But if you want to see the Fords and the Chevrolets and the Toyotas, which are now built in the United States, you need to be here. And over the years, this was always a launching pad for great promotions of a part of our gross national product. Be it the Pontiacs, be it the Oldsmobiles in the earlier days, the Hudsons, even the Studebakers, were part and parcel of Daytona in the month of February. And February is the traditional time to run the heritage race. They've been racing here since on the beaches of Ormond and Daytona since 1903. So if you are a snowbird, you come south to see the festivities, which used to be on the beach where Sir Malcolm set the world record at over 200 miles per hour, where so much of American automotive performance history has been established, and see it continue here in this beautiful 2.5-mile facility.
Very well put, Ken. Ken, last year's winner, Jimmy Johnson, what chance does he have this year, if you were predicting it?
Very, very good. I mentioned that it was a Quinella, but I only mentioned one half. The other half of that Quinella is the 88, which is Earnhardt. Still, Earnhardt Jr. In the heart of American racing represents so very much. And the faithful stay with him, and to see him run well is very, very important. We just saw him out here. He finished 5th. He certainly looked like he was right behind Tasmania's Marcus Ambrose. And then you saw some new names. Young man named Wise qualified 6th. And the 15th across the line is this Alex Bowman. And this was his first effort. And we started 24-25. He's made it into the field. And his celebration tonight which will last very briefly, is the fact that he is in the Great American Race. But the Quinella is 3 and 88, which is the Richard Childress car, and it is the Earnhardt car, number 88, that is carrying the Hendrick Racing Stables colors. So right behind that, I would say that Jimmy Johnson is next. He is so methodical, so careful, and runs so very, very well. He gets everything he can out of his equipment, famous for it, and he's going for a 7th national title this very year to tie Richard Petty in that category, along with Earnhardt, of 7 national titles. No one thought that he would do it, but he could do it in consistent years as he has as well. But he's done it, and he's certain. I'll tell you another interesting thing about him. He came out here and ran that special race, which was sort of an introductory trumpet player before we got down to serious business. And he ran that and looked extremely strong over the weekend. And the day after he ran that race, he ran out in a half marathon and ran that in about an hour and 20 minutes. So he really works out. He's in great condition. His mind is right. He knows what his car has. And again, he's driving for the famed Hendrick stable out of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Absolutely. Ken, before I let you go here, I want to touch on this because you brought up the King Richard Petty, who's certainly very revered in auto racing. But he got into a little bit of trouble this last week when he made a comment. I'm going to catch the listeners up who haven't heard about it. I'm sure they have. But he made a comment in regard to Danica Patrick to a reporter saying that her chances of winning is that she could only win if, quote, everyone else stayed home. He was kind of called on the carpet for that, about being sexist, because obviously Danica is female, and his response to that was, "What I said is what I said, that's what I believe, okay." That was his quote. What do you think, Ken?
I thought it was tongue-in-cheek, and I thought it was Richard having a wonderful time in his advanced age and trying to stir a little something up, and he certainly did. He's fully capable of that. He is still, when it comes to these high holy days down here in Daytona, the most revered, and I thought he did it with the tongue-in-cheek. And it certainly got a great response and got all kinds of people in a furor. And I think he walked away and had a little fun with the whole deal.
Ken, I have to ask you this about Danica, because maybe you aren't, but I consider you a racing purist. What do you make of Danica going out and posing in her bathing suit and things of that nature? How does that make you feel? What do you think on that?
Oh, damn, I love it. She's a very attractive young lady, and more power to her if she can strut her stuff. The interesting thing about her is that she is quick. She's proven it in the Indianapolis car. She sat on the pole for the 500 a year ago. What she doesn't have is seat time. And I was surprised a year ago. They ran her in this biggest of the American stock cars, which are 3,400-pound cars and are considerably different from a 1,250-pound Indianapolis car. The braking, everything about them, it's a totally different discipline. And I was surprised that they didn't make her run more races in these bigger, heavier cars, which still have such sophistication in them, in their power plants, and in how the geometry that goes into them, how they're set up. And I was hoping a year ago we'd see her run twice as many races. Simply, seat time is so critical. It's like becoming a doctor. You've got to spend 7 good, strong years before you are really capable of being considered at the top of the group. And don't kid yourself, this 23-year-old on the pole, he's been running, I think, for 10 years. He started as a child. And Trevor Bain, who won here 2 or 3 years ago, he'd already won 200 races. And Jeff Gordon, when he came here, remember they brought him from California to Indianapolis because he looked to go to Indiana, better put. And he was 14 or 15, and he'd won a ton of races on the West Coast. So when you hear about them as these youngsters, they've been going to junior college and junior varsity and working their way up through. And Danica just didn't have that much time in these kind of cars. She's gaining ground, and she looked very good out here tonight. I thought Danica had a really good run. I'm not seeing here on the list. Where did we see Danica come across before it was all over? She was back in 14th of the 24. But the nice thing was she stayed with the pace. She was as high as 9th a lot of the night. And Tony Stewart has great faith in her, as he told Richard Petty, in no uncertain terms. And that added to the relish that you need when you're running an American iconic event.
Ken, I caught up with your old broadcasting partner Ned Jarrett today, and he said that he doesn't think it'll happen. It could, though. But if Danica would win on Sunday, it would be the biggest thing in NASCAR history. What's your take on that?
I'd have to think about that a moment. I'd say yes. I would never fault Ned Jarrett, who is one of the brightest people that ever sat in a race car, a very thoughtful human being. And that wasn't just kindness on a part of a very kind man. He knows the game, and he knows it top to bottom, and he has seen his own son win this race, the one that he could never win. Came so close and missed it. And he knows this inside and out. So take his word for it. You were talking to a good person.
I want to wrap up with this question, Ken, and I did it with Ned earlier on. I put him on the spot. I said, I know what the odds makers think. I know what the people out there are saying, but who did Ned Jarrett think was going to win the race? And he said Dale Earnhardt Jr. is ready. In Ken Squier's opinion, who's going to win Sunday?
He's part of the Quinella. 3 in 88 Earnhardt, or 88 at first, and Austin Dillon second. I like the Quinella. That win, place, and show bet is always tricky, and it's more tricky here if you're willing to put a quarter down, because it isn't 8 horses or 12 horses or 2 teams. It's 43, and you're looking at the number 1 shares in American motorsports. These 43 that come here with so many championships, so much experience, so that even when you hear about a new youngster like Wise, you'd be wise to pay attention, because 4 times, this race has been won by a newcomer, and that includes Lee Petty that first year in 59. But, of course Ned Jarrett's right. I would never argue with Ned Jarrett.
Neither would I. I'll take his word for it. The race again, the Great American Race, as Ken Squier coined it, heads our way Sunday, 1 p.m. on Fox, and check your local listings for the radio station. It'll be on all over the country. Ken, do you miss the booth? I know you're still doing broadcasting, but that day, do you miss being right there?
Oh, I'm right here. I'm right above. I'm on the 6th floor, right over the start-finish line, with my friend Dick Hart from Atlanta. And we're having a swell time. It's being part of something, and this is a part of Americana. And for those of us, see, I'm from Vermont, and no one understands that in Vermont we were always the stock car racing, always drew the largest attendance of anything that happened in the old Green Mountain State. And growing up as a child, there were 22 tracks up in Vermont. We have some darn good skiers. Don't you forget it. We're proving it over in Russia. And 4 years from now, when our biathlon gets straightened around, we're going to take some more medals. But as far as Americana is concerned, this particular sport really touches the United States. These people all come across pretty much the same, as common men who do uncommon deeds, and it makes it such great fun to be a part of it. Small part, but a good part. And sometimes just being the parrot is okay. You don't have to be the eagle.
Ken, if Earnhardt Jr. does win, as Ned feels he might, as you feel he might, boy, that's an emotional moment, is it not?
Yeah, for me that would be such a moment. to be here and to watch him win this race after so many efforts, and he could win anywhere, anytime, anything on a racetrack. Dale Earnhardt was fully capable. And then to be here to see his demise up here in that tragedy in 2001, and to know that his son was coming along. And I will always believe that the greatest sadness, Dale Earnhardt never raced for anything but first until the day he died. And on that day, there he saw his son fighting for first place with another young man named Michael Waltrip in one of Dale's own cars. And I've always thought that as he went down, it was a bit like the mythicism, but as he went down that backstretch, in those last several laps, he was saying to himself, you know, I've won this thing, and what could be better than to see my race car and my own son duking it out to win this race. And I often wondered if his heart was as much in it as he always was, because he was such a fighter. And he seemed to be back there with his pals, his friends that he'd raced with for years. And then it happened, and he left us. So to see Dale Earnhardt Jr. continue the Earnhardt tradition, which goes back to Dale's father. Don't forget Ralph Earnhardt. He was one of the meanest mothers that ever sat in a race car. Ask Ned Jarrett. They were great friends. There was a wonderful story about coming back in the Carolinas where Mr. and Mrs. Earnhardt and Mr. and Mrs. Jarrett went to the race together, and they brought their cars over, and they got out there. And Ralph not only parked Ned off the track, but wrapped him around a tree, and they had to ride home together. That's the old days. That's the tradition, and it's the tradition that's part of what is here, alive and well in Vermont. And wherever you are, wherever American stock car fans are getting ready for the great American race.
Ken, I have to tell you, I got a chill there, you telling that story. It's a great tradition. You named it right. Forget the New York Times. I can't thank you enough for taking these moments, because I know you're very busy. We can hear it in the background, and I hope to speak to you again in the future, and you're a great part of that tradition. Thank you, Ken Squier.
Good night.